All right, welcome everyone to today's Google Search Central SEO Office Hours Hangout. My name is John Mueller. I'm a search advocate on the search relations team here at Google. And part of what we do are these office hours where people can join in and ask their questions around their website and web search. And we have a handful of submissions on YouTube already, so we can go through some of those, but also some people already jumping in to raise their hands. So maybe we should get started with you all. Let's see. Akash, I think you're first.
Hi, John. Hi.
Hi.
I just have two follow-up questions on my the previous week for the outage one, the server outage which I have asked already. So this is does it really matter what type of server you have and in which country it is located? Let's say I have a client whose target audience or everything is been in India, but the server is in US. So does it matter that Google will start sending more of the traffic from US, or is it showing more of the pages in the US rather than in India? Is it something like that?
There's nothing around geo-targeting with the server location. So from that point of view, it doesn't matter so much. Sometimes there's a bit of a speed difference that you might want to look at or at least test, where if you can host your server closer to where most of your users are, then it tends to be a bit of a faster connection. Sometimes that plays a bigger role. Sometimes that plays a smaller role. Um, it's, I don't know, sometimes worth trying out. Also, if you use a content delivery network, then oftentimes the content delivery network will have nodes in different countries anyway, and it'll be essentially the same as if you had your server in multiple locations. So it's from an SEO point of view, from a geo-targeting point of view, it's a non-issue. From a speed point of view, maybe you can usually test that as well. If it's a critical speed issue that affects the core web vitals and the page experience ranking factor on your side, then that could have a ranking effect. But it's not so much that it's because you have your server in a different location. It's just because your website is perceived as being slow by your users.
Okay. Okay. Last week, so you said if your website will be down for an outage, so you can show a status code of 503, okay, like 503 for not for a couple of more days, but for a day it will work. So recently, my client is again trying for a server migration. So which he said we don't want to a lot of 301 redirects right from images, the HTML files and CSS and all those. So what they were thinking is to just for an hour or so, just take the website down and add it to the new server, and just for a couple of hours, let's say 1 or 2, the website will be like 503, and then it will be back again. So is it the right way? Is it going with the 301 for a couple of days or months, and let Google understand that we have migrated from A to B server, or just down the website for a couple of hours and then again showing up the website, since just like a server migration happened, but it does not shows the complete 301 the
Yeah.
parts.
Yeah. So usually that's kind of expected, where if you do a server migration in that you change your IP address or you move from one server to a different server, then usually you would keep all of the URLs the same. And if the URLs are the same, then you don't need to do any redirects. So from that point of view, like not having 301 redirects in place is kind of normal. With regards to whether taking it down for an hour or two to do the migration is kind of the best approach, I don't know. I mean, ideally, you would not need to take your server down. But if you need to take your server down, and if you can serve a 503 result code in the meantime for that hour or two time that you need to move everything over, usually that should be fine. Like from a search point of view, we will see that there's a temporary error. We'll try back after a couple of hours. And if it works then, like perfectly fine. There shouldn't be any effect at all in search.
Okay, so one last question will be okay. let's say we have no landing pages for the ads campaign, right? There is like SEM team who does a lot of landing pages they wanted. So a part of their content is been taken by let's say our products or the services pages. However, what we feel is since it's a landing pages and it's kind of like might have some kind of presence only online, so the news publishers or any kind of authors or bloggers may write about those things, and they directly link from their page to our pages. So is it right to add a canonical tag of that particular landing page, which is like an ad campaign of the product or the services? Because in that way, can I tell Google the links or the influence that you are getting for this particular page, the canonical has been different. So the canonical is the my product page. However, so can you just like shift the overall influence to the product pages in the canonical has been changed of that particular landing pages, and just help my page a little bit rank better. I know the links that does not matter, as you said many of times on the Twitter, but since that there can be that influence shift can be done.
Yeah, yeah. You can definitely do that. I mean, it depends a bit on how you set up the ads landing pages. Obviously, if they're blocked by robots text, then the canonical, we will never see that. But if they're crawlable, if they're otherwise indexable, and you have the rel canonical to your preferred version, that's perfectly fine.
Cool. Thanks a lot. So thank you so much.
Sure. Jeroen.
Hi, John. Hi, everybody. John, we have been working on CLS problems for a couple months now. Most of them are okay now. I think we're almost up to the finish, but there's one thing that is popping up like from randomly out of nowhere. Is it possible that the font could be a CLS issue?
The font.
The type of font, because we have some CLS contribution like 0.01, 0.09, 0.08, and it's all just in the same paragraph on the font. At least it looks like it's the font.
It could be. Like I'm not an expert on the CLS side of things, but depending on how you set things up on a page, if you're using an external font file, then that file has to be loaded. And depending on how you display the content, it might be that you display the version of the content without the font file first, and then it loads the font, and that shifts the layout around. So that could be something that might be happening there. I think someone in the chat also just mentioned it, like the web font side of things. I think on web.dev, the Chrome folks have an article about using fonts and minimizing the layout shift. So I would check out for that.
Okay. Is it easy to find? I think so, right?
Don't know, probably, hopefully.
Okay, then I will just check it regarding the font. If I cannot manage it to fix it, because also the developer did not see any problems with it, like, hey, what's going on in that paragraph. But okay, then we check the overlay of the font and where it's loaded. Yeah,
I think also in Chrome developer tools, you can do things like block the URL of the font file and load the page and kind of compare it a little bit clearer to really see, is it really from the font, or is it something else maybe that's causing this issue?
Okay. Yeah, we'll check that in depth. Thank you.
Cool. Good luck.
Thanks.
Axel.
Hey, John, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, great. So I work for a website in sexual wellness. So it's really with the sex toys and everything. And since maybe almost 2 months now, we are no longer ranking on our own brand name in France. I asked this question already, and then I mentioned that it was a biblical story because the brand name is Adam and Eve. Now we are clueless of what we can do because we have always ranked on position 1. When people search for Adam and Eve, there was our store. Now people can find us, but then only when they type Adam and Eve together. So we are really wondering, like, which way can we go to get like a certain ranking on Adam at Eve. We were thinking like maybe remove all the sex toys from the homepage, but then like it's not like we got a penalty because it's only that page.
Yeah.
It's really weird. And we can still advertise, of course.
And it's only in France and only the homepage, or?
Yeah, it's only like that's only our brand name in France. So
Okay.
that's where we have the problem.
Okay.
And we know that Google wants to, of course, offer people what they're looking for. And we understand that when people look for Adam and Eve, it's not quite a store in sex toys, but then it has always worked. So it's kind of odd.
Yeah.
So any IDs?
I think it might be tricky, but I probably need to pass it on to the Safe Search team to check out, because one of the tricky aspects there is if our systems recognize somehow that people are looking for something that is very different, kind of from the style, specifically with regards to kind of this adult content, then that's something where they might say, well, you're looking for this term, and this website is called exactly that. But if we show that to people who are kind of not expecting that, they might be confused, or they might find like something is wrong. Like if you're searching for, I don't know, some Disney character, and suddenly you see a sex toy store, then that would be something kind of unexpected. And the average person who's looking for that character, they might say, well, I was like, why is Google showing me this? This is a bug in Google.
Yeah.
And I don't know if something along those lines might be happening there. I feel it's possible, especially if it's like just on the border and in individual countries maybe, or individual variations of the search term that you're using, that our algorithms are kind of like on the edge and not quite sure, like, is this something we need to watch out for, or is this something that is pretty straightforward that we can just show this website?
Yeah.
And I could imagine with something like a sex toys website, it gets tricky there.
Yeah, it's always hard.
Yeah, but I'll definitely pass that on to the team here to kind of take a look and see if there's something on our side that isn't working as expected or is working as expected.
Yeah, because now you're talking about like position 1 ranking for a long time, like sometimes competing with Wikipedia, of course, and now just out of the top 100, gone, and maybe close to 150K of traffic a year on our brand name. Like that's a lot of traffic that we're talking about. It's really messed up. And a lot of people are kind of upset about the fact that we can advertise, but no longer organic. So
yeah. I don't know. I mean, on the one hand, there's the aspect of just because it worked in the past doesn't mean it'll work in the future.
No,
so that's kind of like one bias I think is worth watching out for. But to me, it feels like something that's kind of edge case. And it could be that if we chat with the Safe Search folks, they'll be like, oh, the next time this guy comes up, like tell him to do these 5 things and everything will be better. I don't know if that's something like along those lines, but I'll check with the team.
Thank you.
Sure. Let's see, Craig.
Hi, John. How are you doing?
Hi.
Very interesting subject, that, the Adam and Eve one. I've gone through all the sort of safe site terms on your terms and conditions there. So yeah, no, interesting. Anyway, just wanted to pick your brains on something really. So I had a bit of an issue earlier on this week where my paid team our media team were doing paid ads with Pinterest, and caused a massive issue where Pinterest were like crawling our website and then actually putting our servers into overload and meltdown, and brought up a load of 503 errors. So we figured out the problem. We blocked Pinterest, turned them off, but we got like a lot of pages, like quite a few hundred pages that have now still on a 503 in Google Search Console. I know there's like some issues at the moment with Google Search Console. So I've gone through the pages, well, quite a chunk of them. They're all working, everything's fine on our side. So I've entered, revalidation, and it's been going for the last 2 days. So just wondering what sort of timescales are we looking at, or is there anything I can do could I resubmit sitemaps to get it to work quicker? Is there any advice?
How long was the 503 in place? Do you recall?
We sort of found it last Monday, Tuesday, fixed it, blocked Pinterest, and we're back to normal now.
Okay, so a couple of days, I guess.
Yeah.
So if it were less than a day, then we would probably just automatically pick that up and retry it again.
Yeah.
If it's more than a couple of days, then it can happen that the URL drops out of the index because we think it's more of a persistent server error. And in a case like that, it essentially needs to wait until we recrawl that URL again, which can happen, depending on the URL, can happen after a couple of days. Maybe it takes a week or so to kind of be recrawled. But essentially, that's something where it goes through the normal recrawling process and then picks up again. So what I would usually do with a situation like this is look at the errors that you see in Search Console and try to prioritize them and figure out if there are any that are like really critical for you. If they're random long tail landing pages on your site, then like I would just let them get recrawled over time, which will happen at some point. If they're important pages, then I would do things like resubmit them in Search Console directly manually.
So I did that with a few category pages, like manually. So I could just do the category ones and wait for the long tail ones to then come. Okay.
Yeah.
That sounds good to me. I'll give it a go. It's quite a lot of pages to do in multiple markets, so I'll get cracking.
Yeah.
But any idea on timescale?
I don't know. So submitting to indexing through Inspect URL does go a little bit faster, but it's not something that is guaranteed to get picked up automatically. So it can still take a little bit longer to be reprocessed, all of that.
What if I resubmitted the XML sitemaps? Does that do anything?
I don't think that would change that much in a case like this, because on the one hand, just resubmitting the sitemap file isn't really a strong signal for us. We would look more at the date in the sitemap file. And if you just manually update all the dates to say, oh, we changed it today, to kind of like encourage Google to pick it up again, then we'll look at the sitemap file and say, like, all the dates are the same. This is not really useful.
Okay, sounds good. I'll get cracking on that. Thank you very much for your time, John.
Cool.
Cheers.
Good luck.
Thanks.
Bye. Let's see, Lau, I think.
Hello.
Hi.
How are you doing, John?
Pretty good.
Yeah. My name is Ben, and I have some question. Hope you will answer it for me. Yeah. Like 3 weeks ago, I received a message from Google. This is a menu action, unnatural link to my website. So I export the list of the domain, external domain to my website, and I find out that there are more 400 websites that copy our content. It's kind of the whole website design and content, and some websites that copy a part, some page of my website. And I think this is the reason that why I get the menu action, and I don't know how to take down this copy website. So I contact the service called GMCI to take down the website, and this cost me one website is 199 USD to take down this website. And I see the list that there are more 400 websites, and I think the cost of take down this copy website will be huge. And our technical developer try to take down them, but only 9 websites, and there are a lot more. And after I take down one website, they create a new website to copy our content, and in our content there is a internal link. So insert console, we see there are lots of unnatural link to my website, and I got menu action. So I don't know how to deal with this situation. So do
Okay.
you have, yeah.
Okay. So I think there might be multiple things at play. On the one hand, for the DMCA process, it should be free. So if there's someone charging you money for it, then that sounds like some, I don't know, third-party company that is submitting them in your name. Because usually submitting DMCA complaints is something that is free. So it's free to submit them on Google. It's something that you can submit directly to the hoster through the abuse address, for example. And there should be no charge associated with that. So if you ran into someone who's charging you money for DMCA complaints, then I suspect that it's not a legitimate kind of DMCA complaint there. So that's kind of the one thing. The other thing is what you can also do for cases like this where you can't remove the content. You can use the disavow links functionality in Search Console. It's not directly built into Search Console, so you have to search for it separately in the Help Center. But you can use that to submit whole domains. So you can make a list of those 400 domains. You can use the domain directive in the disavow file and just submit all of those to us. And that way, we will know that you don't want these links counted, and we can just ignore them for our systems. And that can also work for the manual action. The other thing I think, which is perhaps more relevant, is usually the manual actions team would not take a manual action just based on someone else copying your website. So for the most part, the manual actions that you receive are done manually by the web spam team. They review the situation for your website. And based on what they find, then they submit a manual action if there's something that our systems can't filter out on their own. And for things like just purely copied websites, like some spammer is copying your website, that's something our systems can deal with fairly well. And that's not something that we would do a manual action for. So that means, to me, either maybe there was a mistake with a manual action. It's always possible. Or there is some other kind of link-related issue with your website that you need to resolve first. So from my point of view, what I would try to do here is maybe go to the help forums and post about your situation and get some input from other people as well. Some of them have different tools for looking up links. And that way, you can get a little bit clearer of a confirmation of, is this really something that I did, which maybe I didn't know that you shouldn't be doing it like this? Or is it something that maybe Google got confused, and I just need to tell Google, like, you should figure it out, kind of thing. So that's I think the more important part that I would try to figure out, like, is there really a link-related issue that I need to resolve or not? And the copied sites, I would see as something you can take care of, but it's not something that traditionally would result in a manual action for links. Does that help a little bit?
Yeah. That's a lot of information for me. Thank
Okay.
you.
Cool. Good luck. And Kai.
Yeah. Hello, Jon.
Hi.
Sorry. Yeah. So my question for you today is regarding translation and more specifically automated translation. I know that's kind of already mentioned in the guidelines. That's not something that Google encourages. We do, but our side is mostly user-generated content. A lot of which is very high quality, but since it's user-generated content, users usually only write them in one language, their own native language. And for us, doing any kind of like manual translation is kind of hard because we are talking about tens of millions of pages. And since Google Translate has improved so much in the last few years, I wonder. I've reached a point that I actually think that, I mean, users who land on our pages and see the automated translated version would get a better experience than seeing the content in the, let's say, original language. So I wonder if that's something the guideline about automated translation still applies, or is, I mean, at some point, I mean, a translator could also translate your content badly. No, I don't know. I just wanted to hear your latest opinion on this.
Yeah, I think our stance is still the same. So we would still see that as automatically translated or automatically created content, essentially, if it's an automatic translation without any kind of a review process around that. So that I think, at least from our guidelines, that would remain like that, at least for the moment. I mean, one way that you could work together with those guidelines is say, well, for your most important content, you will do the automatic translation and have it reviewed by someone local. And if it's OK, then make it indexable. But that's still something different than just taking 1 million pages and running them through Google Translate for 50 languages and then publishing them.
Yeah, maybe for the pages that we can't review due to the volume, maybe we can just show a button and let the user click on that and see the automated translated version. I think that wouldn't be a problem for Google.
Yeah.
Okay.
That should be fine. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know how this will evolve over time. I hope the translating systems will get so that you don't recognize it, but it's like sometimes you see things and you're like, this is still very far away.
Because we do have a lot of very unique content, okay, and it's very well written by the users. It's just that it's only one language.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Cool. All right. Let's look at some of the submitted questions from YouTube. The first one is also about different languages and countries. We have 2 country websites that share common content, including daily news. We notice from time to time that the wrong news page is ranking in the corresponding country. For example, the DE page in Switzerland. Does it therefore make sense to work with hreflang in the news area as well? Because the implementation of hreflang tags in news sector would require a lot of technical effort, and we want to be sure that this effort will be worthwhile for us. So I think, like, just purely from the point of view that you have different versions of content and you're seeing the wrong version sometimes in search, that is essentially the situation that hreflang tries to solve. in that you have the content available for different locations or in different languages, and sometimes the wrong one is shown. So with hreflang, we can guide that to be more the correct version. So from that point of view, that seems like the perfect scenario for implementing hreflang. The other thing to keep in mind is that geo-targeting and even hreflang is never perfect. So if you are very kind of like reliant on the right version being shown to the right users, then you always need to have some sort of a backup plan. And my recommendation for backup is usually that you have some kind of a JavaScript-powered banner on top or on bottom or somewhere that essentially says, hey, we have a better version of this content for you specifically, for your location, for your language, and link to it from there. That way, we can still crawl and index all of the different versions. But users, when they end up on the wrong version, they can quickly find their way to the correct version. So that's usually my recommendation there. But I think the scenario that you described there is very clear, kind of like this is what hreflang is for. You have the same language content for different countries, and you're seeing the wrong one shown. With hreflang, you can tell us about kind of what you prefer in which place. The next question is also about different countries' languages. We run a website with 300 index pages, all in US English. We're looking to translate half of these pages to Spanish, which will be placed in a subdirectory on the same domain and tagged as alternate language versions of the US content. Is it OK to translate only some of the website's content, or should we translate everything and exactly mirror the English website to stand the best chance of ranking in other locations? Will Google perceive the website as being less comprehensive or authoritative to Spanish users if not all content is translated? Is it an issue if the Spanish version of a page links internally to content that is in English? So first of all, when we look at language, we look at that on a per-page basis. So it's not so much that we try to understand this part of the website is Spanish and this part is in English. We essentially look at an individual page and say, well, it looks like this page is in Spanish. And then when someone searches for something Spanish, we will be able to show that to them. So from that point of view, it doesn't matter if only a part of your website is translated into a different language. That happens. Usually, you start somewhere, and you kind of expand from there. I think the aspect of internal linking could be a bit tricky in that it could provide a bad user experience if your internal linking is like all focused on the English version. But if you have individual pages which are in English only and you link to them from your Spanish version, that happens. I think that's something that's pretty common across a lot of different websites. It's just for the most part, if you have Spanish versions of your pages, then I would try to make sure that the Spanish version is also properly interlinked. But if there are individual pages that are not in Spanish, then link to the English one at least. I found the search volume of a brand, say tomato mask, and tomato mask as one word, varies a lot. In Japan, most customers search without a space. But for other countries, the customers search with a space between the brand name. Is it necessary to craft the content for Japan without a space in the brand name to rank higher? So it's not so much that we look at the search volume and say, oh, there's a different search volume here, and we should treat them differently. But rather, what happens in cases like this is, on the one hand, we try to figure out what the tokens are that are involved in the query and on the page. And by tokens, we usually look at things like a word level. And we try to match those. And we also take into account things like synonyms, where if we can tell that this is a common synonym that people use for different versions of a brand name, then we will take that into account as well. And oftentimes, words that always come together. So if you have a brand that is always like one word and the next word, then we will try to treat that as an entity. And then it'll be similar to someone searching for things with one word, for example. So all of these are different ways for essentially our systems to try to look at that situation and say, oh, this is very similar to what you had before. And we will rank them in a similar way. Depending on the actual situation, that kind of like very similar might still be different enough that you can tell. So my recommendation here would be to really look at the search results, and based on that, decide, does it make sense maybe to mention the version of my brand name without a space, because a lot of people look for it without a space in maybe a specific language or in a specific country? Or is Google already figuring out that these things are the same thing, and the search results are similar enough that I don't have to do it myself? So that's something where I'd kind of say it depends, to frustrate everyone. But it really is something where you need to test it, and you have the best knowledge of kind of that problem space, and you need to try it out and see what happens. And you won't be penalized if you have kind of a version of your brand name with a space and without a space on your pages. So it's not so much that you're taking a big risk by also including one version of your brand name on your pages. So from that point of view, I would try it out, see what shows up in the search results. And if you don't speak Japanese and you only see this in Japan, I would try to get a local speaker to help you with that. Because especially with, I found with Japanese and some of these other languages, it's sometimes tricky to understand how people actually search locally. And just taking something and putting it into Google Translate will give you some ideas, but it doesn't really give you that nuance of what do people actually do, or what do they think when they search. And especially things like word barriers can be very different if you're not used to a specific language. Let's see. Does Google treat URLs with a question mark at the end as duplicates of the same URL without a question mark at the end? The question arises in connection with redirects that will eliminate outdated parameters, but not the question mark or the ampersand at the end. I don't actually know. So for the most part, if you have parameters at the end or no parameters at the end, we will treat those as clearly separate URLs. But we do have some systems in place that try to do some almost like lightweight canonicalization for you, in that they try to figure out what simpler version of this URL could we actually be showing, even if the website itself doesn't provide a rel canonical or doesn't redirect to a simpler version of a URL. So a really common one is if you have a page called index.html and you link to that, then that's often the same as just linking to a page that's called /. So if that's on your home page, if it's website.com/index.html, if we were to see a link like that, we could say, well, index.html essentially is irrelevant here. We can just drop that automatically. And that kind of canonicalization happens essentially very early in our systems. And it takes place without things like the rel canonical or sitemaps or redirects, all of those other things. And I don't know offhand if just like a plain question mark at the end would also fall into this category. So that's kind of the place where I'm not super sure. But if you already have this set up on your website, then you can probably tell fairly quickly if that extra question mark at the end is actually being used by Google. Because if you look at your server logs, you'll see, is that question mark there or not? If you look at things like Search Console and look at the URLs that are actually shown in the performance report, you'll see, is that question mark there or not? So from that point of view, you can probably test that fairly quickly. I don't know offhand if we would just drop it automatically. I don't think it would cause any issues even if we didn't drop it automatically. But if we don't drop it automatically and you want it cleaner, then I would definitely make sure that at least you have the rel canonical set up to kind of remove that for you. My website has recently been dropped for a few very important keywords in our primary niche, adult toys, yet for some reason, online pharmacies and health blogs have been thriving on the traffic, and my competitors, me and my competitors lost in this purge. Does Google penalize adult sites for certain queries? And if so, is this the reason that my own website and all my competitors have been given the digital boots from these important queries? I don't think we penalize adult websites in that regard, but we do, like I mentioned before, have systems in place that try to figure out, is the intent of the query actually to find something that would fall into the category of maybe adult content? And if the intent is clearly not for someone to find adult content with that kind of a query, or for the most part not to find adult content, then it is something where we would try to filter those things out. And that's something that usually makes a lot of sense, because sometimes there are, I don't know, adult websites that are named very similarly, or different types of adult content that's named very similarly to things that are maybe child's toys or things like that. And you wouldn't want someone who's looking for a child's toy to actually run into an adult toy website just because it's ranking for the same term. So that's the kind of thing where our systems try to almost like silently figure out what the intent is behind certain queries, and then to kind of adjust that so that we show something that matches a little bit more what the perceived intent is. And understanding what the intent is behind a query is really hard sometimes. And we also get it wrong sometimes. So if you see certain queries where you're like, well, Google totally messed up with this query because the intent was clearly to find this kind of content, and Google's not showing any of that content at all, and it looks really weird, then those are the kind of things that we would love to have examples for. So it's not so much that like Google has something against adult websites. Like there are lots of them out there, and people find them and search for them explicitly as well. That's all perfectly fine. But we really just want to make sure that our search results are such that they kind of match what people expect. And the algorithms on our side evolve over time. The expectations of users evolve over time. All of this essentially means that these things can change over time, and that's kind of expected. Let's see, 2 questions about content. Do sponsored links with a sponsored link help with SEO rankings? So I assume this is with the rel equals sponsored link attribute attached to a link. And no, they do not help with SEO rankings. The idea here is essentially you're paying someone for that specific link. It's essentially a kind of advertising. People can click on that link, go to your website if they like it. And if they really like it, they can also recommend it to other people. But the reason for that link being on that other website is because there's some kind of, I don't know, some kind of financial exchange that took place, or some kind of other exchange that took place. And it's not essentially a natural link that we would take into account for things like search. So from that point of view, it's fine to have sponsored posts and to have links in sponsored posts. If they're flagged with the rel equals sponsored, that's essentially the right way to do it. It's just that these don't have any effect on SEO initially. And again, if people go to your website because they found this link and then they recommend it themselves, then essentially that indirect effect is something that can still be very valuable. And oftentimes, especially new businesses will take kind of an approach to using advertising to initially drive traffic to their website. And if they have something really good on their website, they kind of hope that, well, by driving all of this traffic to our website, we get some awareness for the cool things that we have. And then those people share that further, and we get some value from that. Do brand mentions without a link help with SEO rankings? And again, from my point of view, I don't think we use those at all for things like PageRank or understanding kind of the link graph of a website. And just a plain mention is sometimes kind of tricky to figure out anyway. But it can be something that makes people aware of your brand. And from that point of view, could be something where indirectly you might have some kind of an effect from that, and that they search for your brand. And then obviously, if they're searching for your brand, then hopefully they find you right away. And then they can go to your website. And if they like what they see there, then again, they can go off and recommend that to other people as well. How are Core Web Vitals calculated in single-page apps? Only on the initial first load, or on subsequent page views where only the body content is updated? I don't actually know offhand. I believe we changed something in the way that things are calculated for the Core Web Vitals, specifically for things like single-page apps, where otherwise you would have a situation that you have a really long session on a single web page. And I don't know the details offhand, but they're definitely on the web.dev website. My guess is if you ask on Twitter, for example, then I can also point you at someone who would be able to help you with the details there. Let's see. I don't know if any of you have any questions on your mind. Like, nobody's raising hands anymore. Like, everyone's already drinking eggnog, which is a good thing. But I can continue with the submitted ones, or if we can go to more live questions. All right, Sumit, go for it.
Hi, John. Actually, I have a React website of 5 million of pages, and this is client-side rendering. So we are facing issue for like indexing and crawling on the website. As of now, only 0.4 million pages only indexed in Google Search Console. So my question is that, can Google read client-side rendering properly of a page, or do we move to the server-side rendering? Should we move to?
Yeah. So we can do client-side rendering. We do render essentially every page that we crawl nowadays. So from that point of view, it's usually not so much a matter that we can't do it. But there are certain situations and setups that don't work for search. So in particular, if you use something like the number sign, the hashtag symbol, as a way of signaling the different types of content that you have. So instead of something like, I don't know, a path, you have a hash symbol and then the path after the hash symbol, then that's the kind of thing that probably would not work for search. But if you're seeing already hundreds of thousands of pages indexed, then probably we can index your page as well. What I would do is, first of all, maybe look up the JavaScript-based websites documentation we have on Search Central in the documentation site. There are some tips there for what you need to do and what you should avoid. And there are also some links to different testing tools that you can use to test. And maybe first of all, look at that and kind of think about like how you set up your website. Would it work like that? And then what I would also do is try to find a sample of the pages that are not being indexed and run them through the testing tools. Ideally, find different templates that are not being indexed. So if you have things like product detail pages and category pages, and you're seeing the category pages are not being indexed so well, then I would take a sample of the category pages and really test them with the testing tools to see, is there something small that I can do to improve kind of the indexability of my website or not? And often that means you can find different things that you can improve for a JavaScript-based website. It's something where you could also look at the server-side rendering and say, well, maybe I can kind of like skip all of these extra tests and just go directly to pure HTML and send that to Google with server-side rendering. From my point of view, I would, for the most part, try to avoid a situation where you're just setting up a lot of infrastructure just for Google. And instead, if you're going to move to server-side rendering, do it in a way that makes sense for your users as well. because sometimes you will see also a significant speed improvement by going to server-side rendering. And if you can use that speed improvement and say, well, also Google will have an improvement, then that seems to me like a really good scenario. The other thing I think also to keep in mind is that we almost never index all pages of a website. And it might be that kind of like the number of pages that you're seeing indexed from your website now are essentially just the number of pages that we want to index for your website at the moment. And we will kind of improve over time as we see that the website itself merits being shown more in search. Then we might expand that and say we'll go off and index maybe, I don't know, 1 million more or something like that. But that is something that is almost independent of the infrastructure that you use for the website. So that's and it's really hard to evaluate because we don't have any kind of a meter or something in Search Console that says, oh, we have enough of your website. But it's something where if you run the different testing tools and you see everything looks good, Google can index it. And we're just not indexing that much, then it might just be a sign that, well, this is currently the limit that Google wants to do. And to get more, I need to prove to Google that actually I have fantastic content that should be indexed more. And then proving that to Google usually means proving that to your users. So that's kind of like a non-technical approach then.
And we have checked from like multiple tools, like I have read most of the blogs and find out like if you want to check the rendering of the page, then you can use structured data testing tool. So I have tried that tool as well. But when I fetch through structured data testing tool, then I saw like page content is not come on the HTML page when we test the page. Then the content is missing on the page that time. So Google index the page in the same way that we have seen on the structured data testing tool.
It's possible, yes. And if you see things like that, that is definitely something that you should fix on the site. Because if Google can't render the full page with the full content there, then we won't be able to index it. And we won't be able to show the website for that content in the search results. So that's definitely something I would look into. And sometimes there are simple things like maybe the server speed is just too slow, or the number of requests required is too high. And you can do things like JavaScript or CSS bundling and make everything into fewer files, and then everything is easier to render. But I would definitely look into it then.
Yeah, thanks. And website navigation is also helps to index multiple of pages.
Yeah, I mean, the internal linking is very important for us. To me, it sounds like if you have a couple 100,000 pages indexed already, then the internal linking is probably OK. Maybe it's not perfect. I mean, no website is perfect. But it sounds like it's not critically broken.
Actually, like developer used the JS to interlink multiple of the pages, and they don't use the pagination. Like they call the data dynamically on the page when people click on a 1, 2, 3 sign of pagination, but the page is not changed that time. So I thought like this is the issue in terms of crawler, like because crawler is not crawl the JS linked pages. They need anchor tag to crawl the page or to move to the next page. So we are working on it, trying to fix that issue.
That sounds like something to look into too. Yeah, I think it's sometimes tricky with pagination, but it's also something you would probably notice when you start to look at the patterns of the pages that are indexed and those that are not indexed. Because in the patterns, you might see, oh, everything page 2 or page 3 in a set is not indexed, then maybe like that step from page 1 to page 2 is causing problems.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, John.
Sure, cool.
Yeah.
All right. Any other last questions? Last words? No. Cool. Wow.
I'll say something. not for the sake of saying something, but I thought it was an interesting thread yesterday, and I see that Barry's here as well, about one thing being the cause of a problem. I saw that the thread, and the basic gist was that unless there's a big technical issue such as no indexing your site, generally you can't pick one thing that's the cause or the catalyst for improving ranking. And it sort of made me think about this quite a bit, actually, because I and many others have been in this situation. And one thing, I don't know if it's helpful to others, but to think of your website as your house, right? And you're inviting someone into your home, obviously not during a pandemic, but you wouldn't just clean up one room and leave the rest of your house in disarray. And so if someone came to your kitchen and the sink ran fast, your page speed, like that's nice. But if the rest of the kitchen is a mess, your UX is a mess. And then the other stuff I was thinking was like, well, more analogies like food. Okay, so if you're still in the kitchen, your food is your content, and you wouldn't want it bland or bad, like low. So I was really sort of, I really like that thread because I saw a lot of people discussing it. But I was thinking, you have to think of it, your website really as a home. Maybe the bathroom is plumbing or something, the technical part. Your attic is your storage. You can't get to everything right away. But over time, people are going to wind their way through your home, through your site. And that the more you clean house, obviously, the better your website will be. So, but it was something I've been thinking about quite a lot, that you just can't really look at one thing. I think Glenn Gay often talks about also sort of the kitchen sink, as he calls it. You have to sort of do everything. You can't just sweep it under the carpet. Eventually, you have to get to it.
Yeah. I think it's worthwhile to think of websites as more than just like this unnatural thing where you just tweak some things or set some screws and then suddenly everything runs better. It's like if you have a race car or even just a normal car and you wanted to drive a little bit faster, you can do a lot of different things. You can make sure the tire pressure is OK, that you have good tires on, that your motor is oiled, all of these things. And it's like, which one do you do first? That's really hard to figure out. If your car ends up using less fuel at some point, like, well, which of these things cause it to use less fuel? It's all kind of interconnected. Yeah.
You got to make sure those brakes are good too, right?
Yeah.
I mean, at some point you have to make sure that everything that the chassis of the car, heaven forbid, hits a wall, that it's secure, that it's built right.
Yeah.
And I mean, I certainly went through it where it was UX, it was content, it was page speed, it was ad monetization. We eventually got to everything. So I felt the pain when I read that.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, John, I just remember, actually, I do have a question if you have
Sure.
a couple of minutes. We were talking a few minutes ago about brand mentions, and while you said that, it's not something that Google directly takes into account. If most of the people mention your brand and you say that your brand is a scam, then maybe there's some issue there, no? But now let me flip that. What if also a lot of pages that are mentioning you and saying you're a scam are actually spam pages created by people intending to hurt you? Then how does Google know how to handle that? Because for backlinks, we can sort of disavow the backlinks, but you cannot disavow a brand mention.
Yeah, I think that's also one of the reasons why it's really hard to use anything like that with regards to rankings. Kind of understanding the almost like the subjective context of the mention is really hard. Is it like a positive mention, a negative mention? Is it a sarcastic positive mention or a sarcastic negative mention? It's like how can you even tell? And all of that together with the fact that there are lots of spammy sites out there, and sometimes they just spin content. Sometimes they're malicious with regards to the content that they create. All of that, I think, makes it really hard to say we can just use that as the same as a link. So that's from that point of view, I feel it's something where, like, for the most part, we don't mention it as something that positively affects your website or negatively affects your website. It's just, I think, too confusing to use as a clear signal.
Yeah. Thanks.
John, I just wanted to thank you for everything over the past almost 2 decades. Thanks. Have a great holiday. Happy New
Thanks.
Year's. It's almost been 2 decades, right? Since you've been in this industry. So
I don't know.
And like John,
I feel
last
old now.
well, thank you.
Thanks.
Happy holidays.
You too.
John, one more question I have
Sure.
related to like DOM. Like developer created the DOM and insert some SEO tag in it. So I just want to know, like, Google crawler crawl the content from the DOM for AngularJS kind of websites. Because
Yeah.
if we not insert content in the DOM, then Google cannot read that content of the page.
Exactly. Yeah. So we render the page, and we take the rendered DOM, and we use that for indexing.
Okay, so I have checked the DOM, and I have found like content is missing in the DOM for category and subcategory pages.
Yeah.
So that is a big
That sounds
issue
like
on my website.
Sounds like
Yeah.
something to fix. Yeah.
Yes. Actually, developer told me, like, if they add content in the DOM for millions of pages, then it will affect the server. Like, server will go down. So they have to, like, they told me like that.
Okay. Find the balance. Yeah. Or get a bigger server sometimes.
Yes.
Cool. Okay. Well, maybe we'll take a break here. Thank you all for joining in. I have another one lined up for next week, which I don't know if anyone is actually interested in thinking about SEO next week. But if you are, you're welcome to join in. If you're watching this on YouTube, you're also welcome to just submit questions and maybe see the recording to see what happens. So anyway, thanks again for all the questions and for coming by. And hopefully I'll see some of you again next year or next week. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, John. Bye, everyone. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, John.
Bye.
See you, John. Thank you.
Thank